about, and then I was attracted to that. And then I met my wife, and we have something to work with, and we love each other. I can't wait to go to bed with my wife tonight.
How
I'm
how
married 27 years.
how are you able to like find that? You know, a lot of people come, they go in and out, they go in and out of AA. How are you able to find, your place in AA?
I want to get well. I always wanted to get well. I didn't know why I was feeling the way I was feeling, but I didn't like it. I mean, listen, I had a lot of great times. I traveled. Had everything you could ever imagine. But really, looking back on it, it was all shallow half hours. It wasn't real. It wasn't meaningful. It was what I thought I should be. That was not me. That was being somebody I was, watching TV about. That I thought that's how I was supposed to be.
You retired at 32. Was it easier for you to walk away because you were sober? You think a lot of guys just keep fighting and fighting.
It was easy for me to step away because I got in shape. I fought Foreman. I got stopped in the second round by him, and I answered. I answered everything I wanted to have answered. I made a lot of money. I traveled the world. I turned the page in my life, and I had minor league baseball teams. I had horses. I had fighters. I promoted fight. I did a lot of stuff. Did a lot of things, and I still am. I still love training people. I have a gym out here. I train people. I still like working with the peeps.
When did you decide to use your, sobriety, or you use your platform to help people? You started to speak out about it. You speak to
Listen,
schools.
I always help people. I've been involved in charities my whole life because nobody helped me. I was on my own. So if I can help somebody, by going doing a charity and taking pictures and saying hello and playing golf, or you have going to a dinner or to luncheon and raise money for the people less fortunate than me, maybe they will get to a better place than I got to. It doesn't cost me nothing. A little bit of time, stories, rubbing elbows with other athletes who are great. Wow, in my story, it's not really been that difficult.
So, talking to you now, you really do, and it's part of the program, but you really don't have much of an ego, especially for a guy who was, ranked number one in the world as a heavyweight boxer. Was it hard for you? John Lucas, the guy who played in the NBA and had a drug problem, he says part of, being an athlete, it's hard to get sober because your ego is what makes you so successful. Did you find you had that problem?
Listen, I regret I could have been a lot better. I could have been a lot better than I was. Sometimes I, sometimes I regret that. I don't hold on to it. I touch it. Sometimes I let it go. Sometimes, you're out and sometimes it bothers you. But listen, this is my story. This is my story. I was close. That's good enough. Made a lot of money. Made a lot of friendships. Helped a lot of people. Wow. Look at that. That's more important to me than anything else.
What was it like when you got to know Muhammad Ali? I mean, he was kind of.
He was a great man. He was a great man. He told him, he came to my training camp. He said, Jerry Coon's not the white hope. He's the right hope. And he was a great guy. He called my mother, told her I'm going to be okay. You know, uh, some Jerry Clark. I met everybody.
For you today, what does untreated alcoholism look like?
It's a very lonely, sad place to be. You know, it's just running around in circles. You just going nowhere. And unfortunately, it's a sad story. And most of the time, they don't even die. They just exist.
Did you find yourself when you talked about, just popped into my mind, being alone, your whole life? Were you surprised at the people in the program of how receptive they were when you showed up? I mean, you go there, it's like you go to a meeting, right? For me, the first time, it's like you never met a stranger.
Listen, I'm kind of like a loner a little bit. I am great in the crowd. I love to be in crowds with people and parties, and laughing and joking. I also like to be alone. And so to me, it's just, another day. And today I'm going to be busy. I'm going to have a great time. And tomorrow I'm going to be able to be by myself. I'm going to be alone. I'm going to have a great time. Do you know what I mean? Like, you got to just take it as it comes and roll with it. You got to roll with it.
When
Like, you
you,
got to roll with the punches, but you got that rope. You got to roll with it.
we'll get you out of here in a little bit. I got a couple more things for you. Like when you're talking to your sponsor and you're going through your fifth step, your fourth and fifth step. What was that like for you? You're because people look at it as like, man, this guy's a heavyweight boxer. It's going to be hard for him to humble himself. How are you able to find that gear?
Listen, I wanted to get well, and they told me this is the way to get well. I wasn't going to go in half-assed. I wasn't going to go in partially. I had to write it out. I had to get everything out of me. As a matter of fact, I had to go from where I lived to the city twice to do the fourth and fifth step. I had to get everything out. And I remembered, you know, um, the pain involved in that. But I have to, in order for me to jump over the fence, that hurdle, I got to do the work. Tell everybody. There's a lot of people can't do it. I feel sad for them. I talked to my sponsor about it. He said it's very sad, and I agree. Because, I've got a lot of experience through this stuff, and I try and explain it, but most people don't have it. Do you know something? I've been around for 33 years. Do you know since I came around, not many people I know from back then that are still around. You know that?
Yeah.
That is frightening. That is just frightening. What happened to them? I tell people, those people you don't see, give them a call, man. Maybe they want to come back. Frightening. I never want that to be me. When I was like 5 months clean, I went through, that guy Jack, my friend, he took me to a detox meeting. There was 80 disheveled people. You know what he told them? He said, most of you are not going to make it by this time next year. And I thought to myself, wow, what would you say that for, right?
Yeah.
So after the meeting, I went up. I said, Jack, how's it going, bro? What'd you say that to them for? You know what he told me? Because it's the truth. Because it's the truth. And I thought that moment, that chair is mine. I'm never giving that chair up. That's how life and death this is. And it's not necessarily about life and death. It's about a quality of life that we're afforded the second time around.
I tell people it's like the bonus round of life.
Yeah, I get to be young at heart still.
Yeah, you still get to, and that's the one thing, like people, did you have this before you stopped drinking? Did you think, oh man, I'm never going to have fun again?
I think everybody has that feeling. I remember around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd be driving around and I'd get very uncomfortable for a while, very uncomfortable. I didn't know what the hell that was. And what I realized was that was around the time when I started to think, well, where am I going tonight? What am I going to do? What am I going to drink? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that was the time in my life that I had to work through and I had to listen to other people talking about it. And then I identified it with it. And then it wasn't so powerful anymore. And there was a lot of experiences like that.
Did you find yourself like, toughening up? And that's the thing I tell people that, and I tell myself too, or I hope somebody else tells me, you keep going through those experiences, they get easier, right? All of a sudden 3 o'clock comes and goes and you don't even notice it.
You trust yourself better.
Yeah.
You trust yourself better. I don't think about drinking. I think about my thinking. I got to pay attention to at this stage of the game because that will drive me back. And don't think that there's not people with 33 years that don't go out, 40 years. There's people in the big book that are at that time and went out again. So it's not like we're cured of it. It's one day at a time, one daily reprieve.
How were you with over the pandemic? Did you go to Zoom or are you able to get to in-person meetings now?
Now I'm going a little bit. I still go to Zoom because I can go to California. There's a great speakers meeting every day, 7 days a week at 9:30 in the morning. I do 12:30 meeting in Manhattan. That's a great meeting, the 5 a.m. club. And So, but I go to a lot of meetings. It's coming back. It's coming back. I'm getting out a little bit more. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy pandemic because part of me hated being home, but then the other part of me got comfortable to be here.
Yeah, I mean, you're still doing your show
And,
from home.
oh yeah,
Sirius
but
Channel 156,
but
Monday and Friday.
yeah,
And
Eastern time, Eastern time,
Eastern time, yeah, Eastern time.
I also want to tell you guys, I also got a great book out there about these life and times. It's called Gentleman Jerry, a contender in the ring, a champion in recovery. Barnes and Noble, Amazon, paperback is out now. You also get a hardcover, and it's a story about the ups and downs of life that everybody has.
What moved you to start the union for boxers? Like that was a pretty
Well,
huge move.
obviously, let's stop that. It's not going. It was not a union. It was an organization to help fighters get back to life. But
Okay.
this didn't work. It didn't work, and we hired some guy who stole money from us, and so we shut that down. And they were trying to do a union for boxing, but the guys that needed it, they couldn't afford the union dues. And I thought, what a great story if they take $1 from every ticket and put it in a foundation that would solve all the problems. But nobody wanted to deal with it. The government doesn't want to be participating in it. They want to be hands off of it. So the fighter continues to be an independent contractor. So there's no really hope for him unless he has a good management team who saves his money, which, when you're an athlete or especially a fighter, you think it's never going to end. So you keep spending it. You never had it before, but it does end.
Did you almost fight Tyson?
No.
Never?
I knew Mike Tyson when he was 13. I was, I think, 23. He was up at camp. Customato got him. No, that never happened.
Okay.
Listen, I would have loved to fight Mike Tyson. I would love to fight those guys. I wish I could have, been real, full, in shape. Like I feel today about, you could bounce a brick off my head. I'm connected. I know what's going on. And, unfortunately, it didn't come to me this time around. You know what I mean?
What do you think about the fight? What did you think about the Mayweather and Paul situation? What did you think about that fight?
Mayweather felt old, and Paul was a lot bigger than him, a lot stronger than him, and he used that jab, his corner told him keep jabbing, and he couldn't get in. So I remember Mayweather's corner telling him in one of the sixth round or so, fifth round, listen, use that jab this round. He said, I can't, it's not working, because the guy was sticking his jab out. And Logan Paul got really tired.
Okay.
Logan Paul got tired, and then he got a second win, and was able to finish strong. So he showed his face. And listen, during the pandemic time, it got a lot of people out of their, discomfort, and all these what do they call them? Those Zoomers or whatever they are.
YouTubers.
YouTubers. They all, crossed over and seen boxing too, because they put some nice boxing shows on. So maybe we're going to see that crossover.
Yeah, it seems like it's really building.
I think it's here to stay. I think it's going to stay, and it's got to be special guys. Not going to go on every month. Maybe a couple times a year or something. But aside from that, it's all good.
Who's the best heavyweight right now?
I got to say Fury, Joshua. If Wilder hits Fury, Fury's going to go out. They're all bruised. They all got knocked out. They all got stopped. They all got dropped. I mean, Fury never really got knocked out. And so, listen, it's an interesting division. Boxing is great itself. There's all great divisions from lightweight to welterweight to junior welterweight. You got light heavyweights, cruiserweights, and the heavyweight division is great. So we're going to see great boxing matches coming up. So I would say download Boxing Scene on your computer face and just look it over once in a while and see the great fights coming up.
Boxing Scene?
Boxing Scene. It's a great app to hear all about boxing.
What's it been like for you to be on Sirius on Monday to Friday, to have that platform, to have that show?
I love it. I went there 12 years ago to do an interview, and the president said, "Hey, listen, I'd like to start Monday." I said, "What?" I said, "Let me think about it." I said, "Why not?" And I'm having a great time because I love the game. I know the fighters, so I'm giving that information out to the fans.
Do you ever think about like your life today as opposed to, if you hadn't stopped? I mean, you're doing all this stuff today.
Most likely I wouldn't be here. Most likely I would not be here today. I wouldn't be married to this wonderful woman and have these beautiful children.
What do you say to people who are on the fence about getting sober? People who, if a guy's coming in and out, and he says, "Jerry, what do I have to do?"
Put it down for 90 days. Go to the meeting every day for 90 days. See how you feel after that. See if you can last 90 days. If you can, maybe you don't have a problem. But most likely you can. If you're an alcoholic, powerless over alcohol, and your life is unmanageable. If that's the case, you better start growing up, my friend.
Are you involved now? Do you sponsor guys and stuff too?
Of course I do. Yeah, I mean, it's nice because I read it you're helping somebody else get comfort, get understanding, get stronger. It also solidifies your own recovery.
Yeah, it's like I get more out of that than I do from almost anything else. Just sitting one-on-one with the guy and getting real with him.
I also read Drop the Rock is a great book. Mm-hmm. I'm sure it's not going to go on the radio. It's going to get the clock. Drop the Rock and also The Untethered Soul. 2 great books.
Okay.
I'm in process right now of doing a 6 and 7 step right now for 90 days. Call my sponsor every day and talk about it.
Talk about your character defects and God, removing them. Yeah, you're the real deal, Jerry. I can't believe I got a chance to talk to you, man.
Well, I'm having a great time. It's all good. It's been a good interview. Listen, send me a copy of this somehow.
I'll send you. I'll just text it to you. Is that okay?
Sure. Or email me. You got an email?
You can text me or email, and I'll follow you on Instagram too.
Okay. Listen, you got a pen?
Yeah. Hang on one second.
Come on, bro. Get this shit out, bro.
Hold on.
Don't be slothful, bro. Don't be slothful.
Hold on. I'm not being slothful. Hold on. All right, go ahead.
At gmail.com.
Okay. All right. Yeah,
where's this going to run, do you know?
Yeah, it'll be, so next Thursday, or I'm sorry, this Thursday, it'll be on, it's a podcast, right? It'll run on all the platforms like Spotify, iTunes, all that stuff. So I'll email you a link to it. Good. And you can listen to it. You can share it. Do you want me to take the stuff out about Drop the Rock, or can I leave that in there?
You can do whatever you want.
All right. I just wanted to make sure, man. Anything else you want to share about sobriety?
I had a great time with you. That's all. It's been a great time. Just send me a copy of it. I like the questions. I like the answers, and it's cool.
It was an honor.
Same here, brother.
All right, man. Thanks, Jerry.
Talk to you again sometime, okay?
You got it.
See you, Paul.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at RogueMediaNetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.
Scott Silverman is a crisis coach. He helps people with family members that struggle with alcohol addiction and with addiction overall. We talk a lot about the opioid epidemic, and we talk a lot about things that he is doing to change the way that America looks at substance abuse and the way that we treat substance abuse together. Another guy with the TED Talk. How about that? All right. He's got his own day in San Diego. We talk about that a little bit. He's been honored by CNN as one of the heroes that helps society move through stuff like this. He's got 2 books. He's got a podcast. We talk about it all. This is the guy that you want to lean on heading into the holidays, especially if you're trying not to drink, if you have a family member you're worried about. By the way, this guy's a crisis coach, and he's the president and CEO of Confidential Recovery. And he gives out his phone number on this podcast, and he wants anybody that has any questions about recovery, family members struggling with addiction, give him a call. He put it out there. I didn't. So Scott Silverman joins us from San Diego and just up north in Hermosa Beach, California, just north of San Diego, Kevin Souza.
Hi there. How can I make your day better?
Scott.
Pete.
Hey, you've already made it better by answering the phone, my man.
Well, you threatened me a couple times that you're going to be calling, so I didn't want to piss you off.
Are you in sunny San Diego right now?
Well, it's a little cool today, and there's a 2% chance of rain, so they're closing schools.
I mean, it really is. My brother lives out there in Hermosa, and it's south of you, or I guess north of you.
North, yeah. We're just north of the border by about 20 minutes. But no, it's great. It's great weather. San Diego's I grew up here, so it's pretty consistent. We're looking forward to hopefully not getting a brutal winter, whatever that might look like. But who knows? Well, we just ignore it.
You have, by the way, speaking of San Diego, doing a little research, you have your own day in San Diego. February 19th is Scott Silverman Day.
That is correct.
And why is it Scott Silverman Day?
It is what it was is the mayor and the city council just nominated me, and I came in, and it was just a real honor. So for my work in the community and the things that I did in my past, working with people coming out of jail and prison, and women coming out of jail and prison, and working with the homeless. So it was just an acknowledgement of that work. So that was kind of cool. The county did it. They used to have like a pet of the week.
Yeah.
And I was the very first human of the week. It was pretty it was interesting going to the supervisor's chambers, and people were pissed off going, wait, where was that Chihuahua was coming in from last week? And it was me. So, that was kind of a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah, people love pets, and it's interesting. Oh, yeah. I work in the news business, and you can say, unfortunately, right, you talk about what's going on. Hey, somebody was shot and killed. You move on to the next story. If you say something happened to a pet, you better look out, because the phone's going to start ringing, and the emails are going to come in.
Right. No, the driver and the passenger were killed in the car, and the pet was injured badly. They don't even want to know who the driver and the passenger was.
How is the pet?
Yeah, the pet. It's interesting. When what was it? A couple of years ago, there was a couple that went to a veterinarian to get some tramadol for pain for the dog, and they actually found out that the dog was injured by the owners, and and they were drug seeking, trying to get some medication from the vet. So they were just filleted in the community.
Oh my gosh! They injured the dog so they could score drugs.
Correct.
Wow. I mean, hey, and that's how we got here. That's why I'm talking to you, because I used to do crazy shit like that.
Yeah, it's like, what's your point?
Yeah.
They got delayed. They got somehow it got found out, and I think one of the vet assistants turned them in or something, and they didn't even give a hoot about the drug seeking. The fact that they would dare to injure their animal to get the drugs. I mean, it's kind of scary, but the behavior, and what happens, and it's only gotten worse. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
Oh, dude. Yeah. I mean, and the behavior too. You're sober 35 years, and we're going to talk about 37 actually. 37 years.
On the 13th of this month. Correct.
I mean, and for me, I remember it was hard enough to get, 2 days. So I'm not going to shortchange you 2 years. That's for sure.
Well, it doesn't matter. You go through stuff, how it is. ever since COVID, my home group's been on Zoom, but I'm going to 3 times more meetings than I used to. But it's been an interesting time for our world the last couple of years, especially people who want, and desire, have to have that social connection. It's been devastating. I've watched people in my home group. They're not there now, and everyone's saying, well, they went out, blah blah blah. Who's going to go get them?
Have you worked with people that have had, some serious come downs or have fallen off because of the pandemic?
Oh yeah, a lot. Because as a crisis coach, that's what I do. I'm kind of the guy that that in my home group. I've been going there for almost, I guess, 31 years, and so I'm kind of known as the not necessarily as the first responder, but a guy who I give my phone number out all the time, so people call all the time and go, hey, so and so went out. What do you think we should do? And I said, well, what would you like to do? Do you know where they are? No. So, no, it happens a lot. I mean, I know that for a fact, a buddy of mine who's a psychiatrist, worked for the county, that the first year of COVID, 4 county employees that were psychiatrists took their own life over the separation. Because think about it, you're in the people helping people business, and you can't help people anymore, and your untreated trauma continues, which is part of the reason maybe you got in the field. It's just amplified. And that's what's happened, I think, with substance use disorders, with alcohol, with vaping, acting out, anesthetizing ourselves, domestic violence, child abuse. It's just, I did my Ending the Stigma podcast yesterday. I'm talking to my buddy Fred, and he goes, oh my God, Scott, taking a long trip in a motorhome with you would be miserable. Because as a subject matter expert, I do have a plethora of data around, but the goal is to just help create systemic change.
Yeah, and I love that you are smashing the stigma or working to do it, because there's so much work to be done. That's one of the main reasons of this podcast, is to, for people to be, not everybody. I know I didn't feel super comfortable walking into my first meeting, but this is an opportunity for people to drop in and hear what's going on and hear what's on the other side of addiction. I mean, there's this great life, and now it's difficult, right, to find that great life. You got to do the work, but it really is a terrific life. I mean, I don't think about not drinking anymore. I mean, once in a while, of course, I'm an alcoholic, I'm an addict. Stuff floats through my mind, and I respect the disease. I'm like, oh yeah, there it is. If I walk by a Coors Light can on the ground, I'm like, that would be nice. And then it's like, wow, still got it. But, there is a real good life. Now I deal with life on life's terms, or try to, right? And, breaking the stigma is part of that, I think, just kind of putting it all out there.
No, I agree. It's funny. Earlier you said people, you weren't comfortable when you went into your first meeting. I have found that anybody who's comfortable that comes into their first meeting is more than likely loaded.
Yeah, that's a great call.
Why would you be here and feel comfortable? I mean, this is just like, this is an alternative to drinking. It's a way of changing your life, but it's pretty depressing. I mean, there's science around this whole thing, Pete, that you stand up at a meeting and you go, hi, I'm Scott, I'm an addict alcoholic. There is psychology behind the fact that in many ways, just doing that in some ways contributes to the stigma, A, and B, also reinforces the negative connotation that you're broken.
Wow. Yeah, I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah. Well, think about it. I mean, if you stood up every day and said, I'm fat, or I'm uncomfortable, or I'm ugly, or nobody wants to be with me, and you just repeated that, it's a negative reinforcement. And most people walk around with untreated trauma, and a lot of this is just anecdotal, experiential, but there's a lot of studies around it too. But I've just been doing this long enough now. It hopefully gives me a better insight to helping families, because when families call me in crisis, it's not about, hey, we were just thinking Johnny might have they're on, the kid's on fire.
It's a crisis.
And the kid's 37 years old. Yeah. And the family's been trying for 15 years to do it one way. I said, well, how's that working for you? So, I try to intervene in that behavior.
This is a broad question, but what do you tell those families that call you up and say, my son Rick is 37. He's an opioid addict. He continues to steal from us and take our car to, wherever. What do you tell them?
Well, the first thing I tell them, is your son has a disease, and if we were talking about diabetes, we would not allow your son to go throughout the day without checking his blood sugar level, and if he needed insulin, putting insulin in his body. And we would support his diet. If he needed to walk, we'd walk with him. We do all those things. But for some reason, when it comes to addiction, but when someone's deeply in their addiction, it's important you've got to set up some speed bumps. Sometimes you got to change the locks. You have to heighten your awareness. You have to change the way you communicate, and you have to listen differently. And you may even have to change your language with somebody who is, on that path and is not hearing anything that works logically. And that's where a guy like me comes in and can start to, translate a language that might be a little more helpful to the individual. But it's amazing, most relapses, 75% of relapses take place with families who get in the way. And not because they're trying to get in the way, but they're trying to love the person to wellness. And the problem is that codependent behavior, in many cases, will use the trigger words that causes someone to relapse.
So it's about language. A lot of it is.
Well, a lot of it's just listening, and a lot of it's just learning that maybe the language you're using isn't appropriate, meaning you're fighting with each other, which is only making it worse for everybody.
Yeah.
So why keep doing it? So, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
When we start to get into some of your results, we will in a second, but I want to go backwards a little bit and just talk about your story. 37 years ago, you hit some kind of breaking point or something happened where you got sober. Take us back and tell us, and don't give me your story. I don't want to waste your time, but what happened that got you sober?
To be honest, I was in a business trip to New York, and I didn't like flying. So when I flew for business, I would usually, because going back to New York, I take that 7 a.m. out of San Diego into JFK, and I drank because I could, and it relaxed me. And I really had a problem on the plane. I drank way too much at the bar, and then I got on the plane, and I ended up taking some the miniatures off the cart without, because I just didn't want to. I don't really want to buy them, didn't want to spend the money, or just, who orders 9 minis? So I just took them.
Yeah.
I don't want to embarrass myself and look like I had a drinking problem, at 7:15 a.m. in the morning going to New York on a full flight, on American Airlines. So anyway, I did that, and it got worse. And then I ended up actually taking some money off of the bar cart, and somebody saw me and reported me. And then when I went to get off the plane, New York's finest actually boarded the plane before they let anybody off, and I realized they're there for me. So I took my shirt and changed it real quick because I had a change in my briefcase, and then flip my coat around. Anyway,
yeah.
They followed me out, then they grabbed me and handcuffed me, and we did a little interview. And I said, hey, look, I gotta go to the bathroom, and while I'm sitting there, I'm explaining that if you can find it, you can hang hang me up, and they couldn't find the money, so I got away. Yeah, so anyways, that's tracking forward. I just had a week of blackout drinking, and
in New York.
In New York City, yeah. I was one of those, actually, literally I got there, I think it was Sunday night, and Thursday night, I got into some sort of situation and then passed out literally across from the train station. I mean, I was, 3-piece suit, London fog, rain jacket,
What line of work were you in? Were you in
retail clothing business? My
Okay.
family was in the retail clothing business, so I was there on a trip with 14 other people. My job was, we were doing some offshore bidding on some potential, cotton goods that were coming out of the Orient.
This is high-end stuff.
It was a pretty good sized business. Yeah, we had at our peak. We had the family had almost 400 employees. So it was, and I grew up in the family business, so I was, in a pretty good position. But I was out of control at the end there. Anyway, so that morning, I woke up and my wedding ring was on my other hand. I had knots in my head, and I couldn't find my ID or my traveler's checks I carried in those days, and my airline ticket. Everything was gone. It was like 4 a.m. So I called downstairs. Oh, Mr. Silverman, we're so glad to hear from you. When you get a second, could you come down and talk with us? So, I showered and I had no idea. I had a full night's blackout. I had no idea what happened. So I went down. They said, first of all, we want to invite you to never come back to our hotel. I said, oh, okay. And I said, what happened? He said, well, you were picked up by New York's finest. And you were brought to us. You were completely unconscious. And we just put you on the luggage rack and wheeled you up to your room. And security has your ID, your traveler's checks, and your airline ticket. Please go see them. And again, please never come back and stay with us. So evidently it was pretty bad. Anyway, so that morning,
That sounds like it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what's going on. I didn't, I didn't have any idea what happened.
Yeah.
I knew I was in bad shape, and I smelled like alcohol, and I had to meet my team that morning, and I was senior VP at the time, so I just told everybody, hey, go ahead, get started, and I'll pick you up later this morning. And I got to this guy's office, and I just thought, I can't explain this. How am I going to explain this?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in his office, and I said, can I have a couple minutes? He goes, yeah, go ahead. I could use the phone. I said, and then I just realized that this is horrible. I'm not coming out of this one with an easy explanation. So I just started to think, you know what? Maybe it's just best I just stop and my own life and just put everybody else out of their misery and myself included. And it was a warm day in New York. It was in November, and I remember the window was open in his office. So I stepped up to the windowsill and I just started to lean back, and I was going to jump out the window.
Wow. And this is 37 years ago, like right around now.
This was actually November the 11th.
Shit. Okay.
1984. Yeah, so 37 years ago, this coming 11th of November. My sober day is the 13th because when I went to the facility, I was on some prescription meds for 2 days, so I wanted to start my sober date 2 days later, which I did. So bottom line is,
so you're leaning. Hold on. You're leaning out this window, and you're thinking about this is it. I'm just gonna go. I'm up
on the 44th floor.
Yeah.
I think it was 44th floor, and it was a hot day. I'm sweating, and when you drink like that, every pore is just exuding alcohol smell, and I had stains on my shirt. And I knew when I got out of that office, I was going to have to meet with the team, my colleagues, and explain, because I'd actually been gone for 4 days.
Yeah.
Nobody knew where I was, including me. I didn't know where I was. I was just drinking in bars and getting in fights, and because I had knots in my head and my knuckles hurt, and I'm not a fighter. It was just a weird thing.
Were drugs a part of your story at all?
Only during waking hours.
Okay, all right, gotcha.
Yeah. I'm not breaking it down. I certainly can if you want to. I
mean, no. I was just curious. Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah. No, I was polydrugged.
Okay.
I'll give you a list if you're really curious.
No, I'm good.
So anyway, I start salivating when I get into detail. So I'm sitting there, and I remember in my head, my mom had said to me, suicide is selfish. And that kind of resonated with me that day, that morning. And then as I'm moving my butt back to I was just going to lean back and think, you know what? I won't feel a thing. And I'll put it, no more, hardship on my wife. I wouldn't have to explain what my behavior is. I wouldn't have to keep apologizing every time we went out socially or went to a wedding or a bar mitzvah or something. So it was just like, oh my God, I feel great. It's going to be over soon. And then the guy walks in his office and, hey, what are you doing then? You're going to fall out the window. And that was the divine intervention with my mom's voice in my head and realizing, we were married 2 years. We hadn't had children yet. We've been trying. So I thought, well, I hesitated for a second and I said, I'll be right in. And then I got off the windowsill, went to the phone, called my wife. I was crying. And I said, tell Gary, who was a psychiatrist I was seeing at the time, tell him I'm ready. I'll call you in a couple hours, and we'll unveil all this to the family tonight, and I'm ready to check in to wherever he wants me to go tomorrow. And that's how I got into treatment. I literally went in that morning, Saturday morning. It was a Friday night. I flew back, and that's when my journey of recovery started.
What happened to you that I'm talking to you now, and you've got this like vibrant, positive energy? How did you? I mean, obviously you could talk forever about this, and you so eloquently can. But how did you go from the guy who was falling out of the window on purpose to the man you are now? What are some of the things you did?
Well, first of all, I did everything that was suggested, and I'd never been to a recovery meeting. I'd never gone into a 12-step program or any kind of rehab or detox. I really, I believe that this is a disease of denial. I certainly suffered from it. And, I never really had an active family member who'd been, in this kind of condition or situation. There'd been mental health issues in my family and eating and gambling, but nothing quite like this. So I never really saw it. And I wasn't really at the level of my consumption and anesthetization, if you will. There weren't many people that could keep up with me. So I was kind of alone towards the end of my drinking and using. And so when I went into rehab, I remember the first message I got, I'd been given Valium so I wouldn't, go through any DTs or anything while I was detoxing. And I remember my very first meeting that night. It was Saturday night. It was a bunch of old guys, and they went around the circle. There was probably 15, 20 of us, I can't remember, and said, "That any of the newcomers have any questions?" And I can remember opening my mouth and saying, I couldn't form any words, but then I said something like, how does this program work? And they said, well, just listen. And, and I thought, I don't even know what that means. So then they asked again, it seemed like an hour had gone by. And they said, the newcomers have any other questions? And I said, how does this, program work? Probably came out differently. And they go, you just need to shut up and listen. And I thought, I don't like this place already. It hasn't even been a day, And that was my first message, and I really hung on to that. So, because I knew a lot about mood altering substances. I'm a retired unlicensed pharmacist. I understood most medication, how to mix it, when to take it. At my worst, I was taking LSD in clear light form, clear light acid, and it was dissolvable, as it came that way. And I used to use it, put it in my eyeballs so it would go through my tear duct to get to my brain quicker.
Wow.
That's how I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I like to think of myself as an inspirational drug seeker. So anyway, I did everything I was supposed to do. I took suggestions. I changed my playmates, play places, friends. I even left my family business because it was recommended that, my level of, pace that I was keeping was killing me. So I started all over. I went down to state of California workers' comp, and I found out what I was eligible for, and I got a disability, and I changed everything. My friends, the only one I kept was one friend and my wife, and that was it, my family. So
And
I started.
You went to any lengths?
I think I went even further because it seemed like, and there's the caution to that because in the book it talks about don't change your bar stool, for a seat in recovery because you suffering from maladaptive behavior, compulsive obsessive behavior, that doesn't go away. You just manage it differently. So yeah, I did everything they told me to do. I worked the steps, I went to meetings, I volunteered. 4 years later, I'm getting this award at my treatment center for 4,000 hours of volunteer work. And I'm thinking, what? They were tracking, you sign in. I didn't realize they were tracking my hours. And it was just, they'd never seen that before at the treatment center. So I ended up getting offered a job to run the alumni program, which I did on a contract basis for a couple of years. So I was really involved with recovery, which was unusual because, first of all, being Jewish and then going to AA, and AA is basically a Christian-based program. People were criticizing me. I was in treatment. My rabbi came to visit me.
Yeah.
And he said, Scott, Jewish people do not have drinking problems. I go, Rabbi, this ID bracelet I'm wearing, and everybody around here, has a drinking problem. And I believe I do. He goes, well, God is within us. And God doesn't want us to have drinking problems. I said, well, God is within us. He's got to be a drunken fool because I was just with him for a week in New York. So I'm telling you, I was shit-faced for a week. So God's a party animal. Anyway, the rabbi really got pissed at me and he left. And
that must have been difficult though, because we're looking to compare ourselves out, and that's the escape hatch right there. But being a Jewish guy in the rooms, what is that like?
Well, it's interesting because my sponsor was a devout Catholic. And it was funny how we kind of met. I was in treatment, he came and spoke, and he was just at the other spectrum. And I was really, I was mitzvah, I was confirmed, but a lot of it was just because that's what, I was told to do as a kid. You do this, we do this, And he told me, he says, until you learn how to pray on your knees, you're going to have a hard time getting a spiritual connection. And I said, Brian, I can't pray on my knees. I went and checked with the rabbi. He goes, no, we don't do that. And I said, but they're telling me if I don't, I run a risk of potentially relapsing. And I said, I don't want to do that. So he told me, we came up with this idea of smoking cigarettes back in those days.
Yeah.
He said, when you go to bed at night, take your pack of cigarettes, throw them underneath the bed. So when you wake up in the morning and you reach underneath the bed to grab your cigarettes, you find yourself on your knees. Just thank God for getting you through another day. That's how I learned to pray on my knees.
And that's how habits start a lot of times, throughout this whole process. So now you're the president and CEO of Confidential Recovery. You're a crisis coach. The laundry list of positive work you have done throughout the country and in California, San Diego area especially, is unbelievable. Talk a little bit about why you think people coming out of prison, coming out of jail, why they deserve that second chance and deserve to be integrated into society.
Well, first of all, I believe everyone deserves a second chance. Second of all, I believe that they are human beings who have, if we're talking about somebody who was originally incarcerated behind some activity dealing with substance use disorder or some form of addiction, when we put people in prison, we just make the problem worse.
Yeah, there is if anybody that's ever been on a prison commitment can tell you, through recovery rooms, that it is like you show up there and they're dying. A lot of them are dying for the treatment, and they don't they don't get it.
No, they don't get it. Not only do they not get it, but in many cases, the availability of mood-altering substances in long-term incarceration facilities is significant because it's a captive audience. And, as a distributor, as somebody who used to do this for a living, selling drugs, you're going to go where it's easier, to find 100 people that'll buy your drugs versus one at a time on a street corner. Which used to be the way it was done in the old days. You go to a friend's house and a friend brought something over. But if you wanted to make some money and move product quickly, you wanted a big audience, and that's what happened, and that's the way it worked. But so, and I got involved with this organization I started called Second Chance, and I was working specifically with people coming out of jail and prison. Everyone asked me, why would you do that? And I got to tell you, Pete, I don't know. It was just it was organic the way I got there, and being a homeless provider, it just felt right.
I mean, you're in the trenches doing this stuff. I mean, that's God's work.
It was, I didn't. There were some days I was in the trenches. Yeah, I went to some weird places, but it just once I learned more about how to work with people, I found people that were suffering from what I call long-term institutionalization, and they were incarcerated, and they suffered from what I call criminogenic thinking. Once they got out, if you could create an environment for them where you become their new gang, if you will, or their new family, or you create an environment where they can actually grow and produce and feel good about themselves and build self-esteem, you can start to really help people change directions. So, because their bad habits that they had, they're 100 times worse in prison. Because in prison, and I've not never been there, but I worked with thousands of men and women coming out of prison. Their job was to survive. No matter what they did each day, their job was to survive. And those survival skills, we taught people how to transfer those survival skills and put them into a direction that would benefit them. So all I did was kind of repackage, if you will, or redirect, or help people kind of deflect a little bit using their skill sets. Because most people who can survive in prison have a huge amount of skill sets. And we just taught people how to use those in the workplace. And we found we were getting people's jobs at a faster pace than most unemployment agencies were.
Can you give me an example of how you would repackage somebody's skills into helping them get sober?
Somebody, let's just say somebody was a sling, somebody was a drug distributor, okay? And they'd say, well, Scott, all I did was sell drugs, and that's what I knew. I said, okay, so let's just break that down. First of all, you're good at marketing. Second of all, you have a sales background. Third, you have a distribution system that you've worked on. And fourth, you found ways to not get caught until you got caught. So you can escape and evade. You've got some great articulation. You're probably a facilitator. You might be a manipulator, and you've got some tremendous survival skills. So let's use some of those attributes and put them on your resume, and then use those skills to move you into a career path that will help you get to your end goal.
I'm sure it's pretty amazing to see the light come on in people and to see them use those skills to become a better person or just to contribute.
Oh yeah. The most successful clients I ever worked with were women, and watching women who'd spent a lot of their adult life incarcerated, and if they were mothers, when they got out, their level of self-esteem around getting a job was just non-existent. I've never worked. All I've ever done is, I've raised 3 children. I said, well, let's break that down. Housing engineer, facilitator, a volunteer recruiter, a transporter, a motivator, an academic inspirator, a disciplinarian, a cook, whatever, and you list all those skills, because we used to have a big sign on the wall. I remember thinking about it, I'm getting chills. It used to say, "I'm just a mom." And we always kept it folded up. And then when we flipped it down, there was 84 skill sets to just be a mom. And we would suggest that they pick the top 10 that they love the most. And then we framed that path, and getting them jobs was easy. I mean, getting them into career paths was easy, and then I started working with veterans back in the day, and I'm doing it now in a very big way with confidential recovery. And because veterans who had criminal histories, the veteran system would not support them. Literally.
Wow.
It was amazing. The veteran system, if you had a career path of criminality, you could not get disability, you couldn't get access to treatment, you couldn't stay in subsidized housing. So we helped them. And we were getting veterans jobs left and right. And then I got people that criticized me and saying, how is it you're getting more jobs for the veterans than the veterans providers are? And I said, you know what? You guys set up a meeting. I'll come speak to your group. So 2 months later, I go to this group. It's a funny story, I think. And they go, they're all pissed off, going, you're making us look bad and you're taking our money. I said, my earmark money came from a congressman who nearly got arrested a couple of years ago in our community. And I said, the money was for ex-offenders who were veterans. And you don't serve that population. So I brought the money to our community, which I see as a big plus. You weren't denied the opportunity. You couldn't compete for it. And I said, I didn't even compete for it. The congressman did on our behalf, because he thought the work we were doing to reduce recidivism for people returning to prison was a good thing. So I sit in this room, and they're all like humping and rumping, So what's the secret, Scott? I said, well, let me put it to you this way. What I found, and I'm a social entrepreneur, and I grew up in a retail business, so I understand helping people get to the next level, because life's all about relationships.
Yeah.
So I said, what I do every day is I make a phone call to a business person who runs a business, middle management, B level, C level, A level executives, and I ask them if they'd be willing to hire veterans. Well, we do all that too. I said, well, yeah, but I ask, and I do some research on the calls before I make them to make sure that I'm talking to somebody who's a veteran.
Yeah.
So all I did was ask veterans to hire veterans. That's my secret. You're all welcome to it. It was pretty funny.
Yeah, well, I bet that was part of a seismic shift, getting those guys and girls jobs.
Yeah, the path of least resistance. And then I one of my other big home runs is NASCO, which is one of the largest shipbuilders here on the West Coast. When after 9/11, getting anybody placed anywhere where there was a federal contract, if they had any kind of criminal background, you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I met a guy who did subcontract work with them, who I knew through somebody else, and we sat and met, and I explained to him, I said, people who suffer from, I call disease of alcoholism, or they're allergic to it, by the state of California consider them permanently disabled. So why don't you hire our graduates who are permanent, most, like 90% had an alcohol issue or substance use disorder, and use them as a minority group, so to speak, or disabled group to fit into your contract. So he went back and checked, and he said he could. His first year, he hired 40 of our graduates.
And that's, somebody caring about these people with these issues and finding a way to, like you said, I like how you said repackage, rebrand.
Yeah.
Because when we repackage ourselves in recovery, we really are good people who can contribute and who can make a difference. You're one of those guys. One of the things you're doing to make a difference is you talk to people about addiction versus the holidays, right? Is that what we're talking about here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're coming up on the holidays. This is such a perfect time. I'm sitting here talking to you in early November. We call it the Bermuda Triangle, right? You got Thanksgiving, you have Christmas, you have New Year's. I mean, you can even throw in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
What do you tell folks that either have some? Well, first of all, what do you tell people that are worried about drinking during the holidays?
Well, I think first and foremost, which is something interesting that I learned, that we did a study in my old organization, a 3-year study. And what we found was it's really hard. But when people have been in the system, they usually become disenfranchised families, whether it's their behavior or the family just wants to step away or they want to build distance. What was fascinating, though, to follow up with our clients, we had the hardest time. What we found out was the largest, greatest time that people come home to visit mom, if you will, is Thanksgiving.
Okay.
So the college that did a study with us brought in like 80 interns, okay? And on Thanksgiving Day, they went through the database and started calling to check on Johnny. Hey, Johnny, how's it going? Because Johnny was home visiting his mom, and most people would put down their mom as an emergency contact. So that's how we followed up in the study. So I learned over the years, in my own experience, because I went to treatment during the holidays. Most people say, well, why would you go to treatment during the holidays? Why don't you wait till January? I said, well, I was trying to kill myself. I thought postponing wasn't going to be advantageous or work to my advantage. So what I tell families is that, and look, this is the first year kids have gone away for a while because of COVID, and now they're going to be coming home. And my sense is because of COVID and because of quarantines that people have gone through, especially young people, they've learned a lot of new tips and tricks about how to, move into consuming edibles or legalized marijuana or, vaping or, all the issues with counterfeit medication. So they're coming home now for the first time in a while. And if they had an issue before and it got worse when they were at school, when they're coming home, they're going to come home pretty hot.
Yeah.
And families are going to want to fix them. And that just doesn't work. You can't sit Johnny down after being gone for 5 months and say, okay, everyone's going to be here. And, Uncle Bob drinks a lot and Aunt Isabel, is still taking those pain pills. And when you sit down to dinner, you can't be like them. You can't drink and we don't want you taking any drugs. And if you do, we're going to kick you out of the house. I mean, those are all fighting words. Those are all trigger words. Those are all non-engagement words. Those are all shame-based words. So having that kind of conversation with their loved one just is not going to add value. So, what I suggest to families is, look, before they get home, talk about how you're feeling, talk about cares and concerns that you might have. And hopefully you've been talking with your child through the year. And if something's going on, you have a sense of it, but you may not. And then all of a sudden it's going to pop up when they get home. So rather than try to intervene on it, reach out for help. It's just not something, if somebody broke their leg, I mean, you don't go to YouTube and go, okay, Bob, hold them down. You take them to the ER. You take your son or daughter to the emergency room and let the experts work on it. So, why we do this with substance use disorders and mood-altering substances and addiction, why we try to tell ourselves it's okay, we will love them and they'll be all right. They have a disease and they're in their disease, and this allergy they have to whatever they're taking is causing them harm, and we need to love them. But we need to love them in a way where we're making decisions that are going to benefit them, not us, if you will. Because it's a selfish disease. The person who's doing it is selfish because they want to stay high, and the family wants them to stop, and they're selfish, but they don't know how to do it.
And now it's such a high stakes game. I mean, you talk about, you wrote a book about opioid addiction and the opioid crisis. I mean, in our book, it says, hey, go out if you're not sure you're an alcoholic and try some controlled drinking. Well, now, you can't say, hey, go out and go ahead and shoot some or snort some fentanyl, because people are dying. Right. So yeah. It's so important that these messages that you're passing along to parents that hopefully people are implementing them into their care for their children, because it is, you got to turn it over to the experts. This is life or death.
Right. Or you, as a family member, thank you for that. As a family member, get educated. You talk to an expert. You know, there's a lot of them out there. I mean, I like to think I'm one of the leading experts in the country. And, you know, I'll take your call anytime, 619-993-2738, 619-993-2738. You call or text me anytime.
You're the man.
I'll get back to you.
Well,
So let me go to your point you just made, because I just heard this 3 months ago from this old guy at a meeting. He said, you know, everybody thinks with willpower you can really control things. And you'll love this one, Pete. I hope you are. He said, next time you have diarrhea, you use your willpower. It was so funny. You know, what a great example, because it's like, you cannot control that.
it ain't happening.
Yeah, you cannot control that.
What about
Anyway,
yeah, you. I love that, by the way. Or I don't love it. So you and I were lucky enough. My first round of holidays, I was in treatment. I went to treatment for 30 days, and then I went to an extended care place, basically a halfway house, for another 5 months. So I had like 6 months, institutionalized. And I tell people it was the best thing I ever did. You know, a guy told me once, hey, it's a couple months for the rest of your life. And I truly believe that turned out to be true. It was a great place to be for that first round of holidays. I mean, I turned to my friend Tim during Thanksgiving in rehab, and I said, "You'll never forget this Thanksgiving." And he just looked at me with a scowl, but with a sense of humor too. Like, how could you, And Christmas, I was in a halfway house, and New Year's, I was in a halfway house, and I felt like I built up the self-esteem by not drinking during those holidays and having that tribal atmosphere with other people that were trying to stay sober. That really carried me through holidays after that. What do you tell people that aren't that lucky, as you or I were, or they consider themselves maybe at the time unlucky? How do you tell them to approach the holidays? If I just stopped drinking and now I'm faced with Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and all the bullshit in between.
Well, anybody who has had an issue with it, who decides tomorrow I'm going to stop drinking, first of all, 99% of the human race cannot do that. You just cannot do that. You cannot flip a switch if your body, mind, and soul is physically addicted to something that's mood altering. You can't flip a switch, so don't even try. So that being said, it's one of those kind of, it's not a gray area. It's black and white. You're just risking potential medical harm, and you're potentially going to make yourself sick. And if you decide, well, I'm going to switch. I'm not going to drink anymore during the holidays. I'm, going back to my home state. Marijuana is legal. I'm just going to smoke marijuana. Well, you can make yourself really sick. And, it's happening right now. Look, 240 overdoses every day behind opioids, every day, 240 in this country, every single friggin' day. That many people are dying behind opioids. And most of it's counterfeit, meaning you're taking something in your body that you think is X and it's actually Y.
We're seeing that so often with fentanyl now.
Yeah. And fentanyl, anybody can make it. Oh, you can get it online. You can get it mailed to you by the USPS. And you can put it in anything. And we're seeing it now everywhere, from marijuana to vaping pipes, to in cocaine, with crack, with heroin. And, and it's being disguised in the counterfeit world, for example, Xanax. That's one of the big ones. I mean, some people, they haven't got vitamin C yet, but eventually they will. Oh, it's vitamin C, take it. Well, if it's cut with fentanyl, the odds are somebody's going to overdose. Have you heard, by the way, of the Skittle parties?
No.
Yeah. Skittle parties are you know what Skittles are.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine you go to this party, everybody comes in, they bring their drug of choice, and they put it in this bowl. And at a certain time of the night, somebody metaphorically rings a bell or plays a certain song. Everybody goes to the bowl and grabs something. Well, what if one of your friends just got a bunch of counterfeit Xanax with fentanyl? So you heard about these events where people, they go to these parties, 8 people overdose, and 2 didn't survive. That's what's happened. People are just taking such risks right now. And the thing that's interesting is, in my day, there was nothing I wouldn't put in my body.
Yeah.
But the difference is the level of toxicity. And to me, when I think about counterfeit medication, it's poison. It's not even a drug. I mean, it's a drug, but it's masking something dangerous, which to me is poison. So when you think about that, as a 18, 19, 20-year-old, 22-year-old, when you think about going to a party and taking something that you don't know what it is, you could be taking poison. And what I try to just do with families is just impress upon people, because, you know, you're not going to stop an addict. You're not going to tell a kid, don't do that. I mean, I wrote my first book called Tell Me No, I Dare You.
Yeah.
70% of the people told no, you know, they'll stop, but they're not going to stop doing something like that. And according to science, that part of the brain, when it hears don't do something, it basically, the cheerleading section stands up and the band starts playing, going, let's go for it. So my mind is programmed. I'm wired that way.
And it's we're talking about the addict's mind, obviously. Like,
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because you were saying, you know, what does the other person do? The person's coming home. They have to reinforce. First of all, they have to accept the fact they might have an issue. They might have an allergy. They might be allergic to this stuff. And I try to use a soft word. It's really, they might be addicted. They might be predisposed. Some people get diabetes. Some people don't. Some people get skin cancer. Some people don't. Some people have heart failure. Some people don't. But right now, according to science, 15% of our country will have an active addiction issue arise in the next 12 months. But what's even more fascinating, Pete, is those 15%, when they're impaired or they're coming off of their impairment, they will impact 7 people negatively in their life every day.
And that's it there. Yeah.
You do the math. 7 out of 10 will be impacted negatively, and 15% have the actual, you know, they're pulling the trigger, so to speak, on the event. That's 85% of our population
is being impacted by this stuff, you know, addicts are putting in their bodies.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, and our governor in California, he just earmarked $100 million to make it easier for the marijuana industry to get licensed and certified and open up shops.
Yeah,
literally 3 months ago, you know, before his recall thing was, I think Gavin Newsom's a good governor, but where is the logic in thinking that, you know, we've got to help the marijuana distributors? And you know what, right now, according to all of the street talk, the legal marijuana business in all the states that are legal, the business is off because the non-legal marijuana, you know, growers are selling their product, which is just as good, for a third less.
Oh, wow.
Because they're not being taxed.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're going to take substances in your body, and you know, someone says, well, this is 10 and that's 7, it's the same thing. But it doesn't matter what it is, you know, whether it's food or clothes or shoes or cars. This is 30% less than that. It's the same thing. Which would you like? You know, there are some people that probably proudly go into legal marijuana shops and go, I'm supporting the state of
California. Right.
Well,
yeah.
Not after the lottery fiasco. You know, billions are still being passed out and schools are still struggling. And California, we spend 50% more money on prison than we do on education. So, you know, and I don't want to make political positions. I'm just saying.
No, you're stating facts.
It's counterintuitive to me that look, we're actually going to have more people probably die behind the opioid crisis over time than COVID.
That's what I wanted to get with you on the opioid crisis. So you're just saying over time more people are going to die from the opioid crisis than COVID.
Right, and we're not doing anything about it. I mean, right now we're trying to convince everybody they should get, you know, vaccinated. I'm going through my booster next week. So it's just, we need to make it as important of a conversation as other things, because if we keep going to 240 a day, by the way, that is just opioids. I'm not talking about methamphetamine. I'm not talking about alcohol. I'm not even talking about, you know, you and I haven't even talked about behavioral health, mental health issues, depression, anxiety, untreated trauma, PTS. We haven't even discussed that. And those are all things that are existing in almost every family in some way, some shape, or some form in today's world. And, you know, our quarantine the last couple of years has made it a lot worse, especially for those who had no tools. And now their problems amplified. They still don't have the tools. And at the end of the day, you know, the way the treatment world is working, because that was gone, it went virtual as well, which changes things. It's the social model, you know, people getting together, talking about what's going on, is probably scientifically one of the best, but there's still a 95% relapse rate. You know, when you went to treatment, if you did nothing after treatment, nothing, okay, but you went to the best place in the world, and you spent 28 days being the perfect inpatient client, and then you got home and did nothing, the chances are you have a 95% chance of relapsing with no follow-up. That's how high it is.
Yeah. Did you see? I don't want to keep you here all day, but I got a couple other things I want to ask you. Do you see a way out of this opioid crisis? Is there a way out? What do you you wrote a book on this. What did you find? As far as what we're looking at here as a country, or globally going forward.
Well, first of all, there's no vaccination for it. Okay. And it's completely apolitical. It's not a Democratic, not a Republican, not a progressive, whatever classification you want to put it. And it's not zip code specific. And it doesn't matter how much money you have or you don't have. I mean, certainly, certain parts of the community that are economically challenged, there might be more of it per capita. But at the end of the day, when you look at the news, you're reading about the, high level, movie star or singer or musician, or somebody who comes from a family. I just read somewhere that one of the housewives' daughter just admitted
I saw,
overdosing,
yeah,
going to treatment. So I've always believed there's hope and help, but the way this is accelerated and the fact that counterfeit medication is so wildly out there, and that our leadership in our communities, when people ask me, I'm actually getting ready to talk to a pretty powerful group here in 2 weeks about this. We're going to, they're going to bring me in professionally to speak specifically about this, which is unusual because they want to know and they want to hear. And so the fact that you and I are talking about it, I mean, this is significant, but it has to become as much of a conversation on a daily basis as the flu, or as, getting kids the proper education, or making sure that, we have food in kids' bellies and families are becoming self-sufficient. It's got to be part of that dialogue, because with struggles and with barriers and with hiccups and speed bumps and challenges, and we've, as a world, we certainly went through a big couple of years of it. We're going to see more and more of this, especially in the U.S., because for some reason, we're a much pill-oriented society. And, think about this. The drug manufacturers, the Mexican cartels, that with the super labs, the Chinese manufacturers of fentanyl. When you think about your consumer base, if you look at this, the business model, there's nothing better than the U.S. because there's no end to our consumption of it, and we can't get enough of it. And now, because of whenever the DOJ, the DEA puts pressure on whatever, mechanism they put it on, the border, airlines, boats.
Yeah.
The manufacturers start shipping other countries. I mean, just 5 months ago, Australia got 2 big shipping containers of methamphetamine. And the rumors are some of it came from Mexico, some of it came from Canada, and some of it came from the U.S. Loaded up at some central point. Maybe the boats met somewhere in the water, and they, loaded containers and took them to Australia. So now, and methamphetamine is 10 times stronger than it was 10 years ago.
Wow.
So at the end of the day, that's what's going on with drugs today. Marijuana has a 90% THC content. And if methamphetamine is 10 times stronger, imagine how much stronger cocaine is.
Yeah,
so
and this is why people are dying. And by the way, we're not even talking about what you mentioned earlier, the counterfeit stuff.
Correct. And people are also dying because they're mixing drugs with such high intensity of toxicity with other drugs. And what's even worse, and this is what, when Whitney Houston passed away, remember it was Dr. Drew, that for 3 days he was yelling and screaming and upset. He goes, look, we've had musicians and famous people and wealthy people using heroin for decades. We've never seen the kind of overdose we're seeing now. And he said, I'm going to tell you what I think it is. He goes, people in this country, or young people, Adderall, Ritalin, antidepressants, SSRIs, Prozac, Lexapro, Zoloft, you mix those with street drugs, something happens to the body. And this is contributing, in my opinion, because I agree with him, to a lot of the overdoses that are going on, because people say, oh, it's just fentanyl. Well, no, fentanyl is very potent. It's 100 times stronger than heroin, and morphine is 50 times stronger than heroin. So, and because the people that are putting this counterfeit medication together don't have any quality assurance that they have to maintain, and they're not overseen by the FDA or the DEA. They're making stuff that kills people. And to your earlier question about how are we going to stop this, first of all, we got to slow it down so we can have a conversation. Because if we don't slow it down, and by the way, when I mentioned the 240 people that die every day from, mostly OxyContin, other opioids as well, a couple hundred people every day normally would be dying if it wasn't for naloxone, which is in Narcan, meaning their overdose was reversed because now we have that medication that can do that. So in reality, it was last month, I think, the company that makes naloxone or Narcan, which is made with naloxone, and Narcan is the delivery system through nasal spray, said that they're out of product. The demand is too high and won't be back up to speed until February. So if you think about that 240 a day could climb to 325, 350. So, we really have to find a way to get the information. And schools don't even want to put Narcan in because they don't want the responsibility. And you got kids that are bringing fentanyl to school because their older sibling says, look, you carry this, I can't. Or they want to be like the big brother or big sister. And they're seeing it in schools. You saw the other day there was a family with a 2, 4, and 5-year-old that got a hold of the parents' stash of fentanyl, and one of the kids died. The other 2 had to have Narcan to revive them.
I did see that, yeah.
I mean, I don't know what's going on. I mean, I wish I could take a magic wand and just fix it, but, I can't. And
but you are doing everything in your power. Now, before we let you go, you have a podcast, right?
I do.
What's the podcast called? I listened to it today.
It's called Scott H. Silverman Happy Hour. I used the word happy hour because, when my sponsor said, go to a meeting when you did most of your drinking, and I said, well, I drink in the morning, I drink at noon, and I drink at happy hour. He goes, okay, just go to happy hour.
Just go to happy hour. And
pick one of those 3. So I kind of put a spin on it. It's called Happy Hour. And it's on the normal social media platform. And we talk about, I bring the guests in. I got, people like the DA, the sheriff, and the DEA, different experts that come in, and people in recovery, and a variety of different people. And I just interviewed a guy. He wrote a book called Prehab. It's kind of interesting, the whole concept about the disease itself and how to, how the assessment tools that we're currently using, even with the DSM-5s, aren't necessarily going to help somebody if they're not 100% willing. And he said, have you ever met an addict that's 100% willing to get better?
Yeah.
I said, not yet. Not that wasn't, handcuffed to a gurney in a coma. They're pretty motivated.
So you got the podcast. You have a couple books. We're going to link all this to the podcast. We're going to put up here tomorrow. And you got a TED Talk. I mean, you were a CNN hero. You're a guy who is making a difference out there. And the fact that you spent a little time with me today, and continue to move the needle in the right direction, means a lot.
No, I appreciate that. And I hope so. That's why I gave out my phone number, because it's amazing how many people.
Hey, more people listen to this than you think, pal. I hope it's ringing off the hook.
Hey, I want to drink from a fire hose because, every time, and I'm one of those people, a lot of people, my wife's in real estate, and every time she sees a strange number in her phone, she goes, uh-oh. I see a strange number. I picked up your number.
Yeah.
I see it as an opportunity to avoid going to a funeral.
Yeah. And that's the truth,
That's how
man.
I look at it.
That's a business.
So I love
it
when people call. I put my phone up at 9 o'clock when I go to sleep, and I don't get it till the next morning. But I return every phone call, and if there's anybody out there that I can help, and if I can't help you, I promise you I can find a way to help point you in a direction to get help, because it's everywhere. And people don't realize that. And those 3 hardest words in the English language is I need help.
Yeah, Scott,
people avoid it.
You're a mensch, dude. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Pete. I really appreciate it.
And I'll send you this link tomorrow, man, and we'll get it out on all the social media platforms. And we're going to talk a little bit about this on KWTX station I work at. So I really appreciate you, dude.
Call me anytime and bring me back anytime. And by the way, when somebody calls you and says, "Hey, should I really call this guy?" You go, "You better call him." Otherwise, I won't call them. But they call me. They will hear from me. We'll talk about it, and anything that I can do to help the family navigate next steps. That's what I'm all about.
All right,
Thanks
man.
for the opportunity.
You got it, Scott. Thanks, brother.
Start your countdown to the most delicious Sunday of the year at Whole Foods Market. The Easter in Bloom event is on. Experience it in stores from March 29th through April 11th with irresistible deals and delights store-wide. Save on feast-worthy animal welfare certified meats like spiral cut ham and boneless ribeye. Then add a flash of green to the scene with savings on organic asparagus. Too busy to cook? Don't sleep on their crowd favorite catering. Find all of that plus Source for Good floral bouquets and more at your local Whole Foods Market.
Scott Strode has been sober for almost a quarter century, but Don't be fooled. He looks like a very young guy, and I think he still is reasonably young. He was one of the lucky folks that was able to, or I guess maybe got the gift of desperation during the early part of his life. He has a TED Talk. I think this might be our first guest with a TED Talk. He is the executive director of the Phoenix, which is an incredible community all over America. They're based in Boston and Denver. Those are their major hubs. They're getting a spot in LA. It's an outlet where people can show up with 48 hours sober, and you find your inspiration and your recovery in working out. Anybody can do it. You just got to be 48 hours sober. He speaks about, experiencing childhood trauma early on, and that's one of the reasons why he was looking to check out through alcohol and drugs. This is an amazing story. He's a really cool dude. What I like about this podcast, this particular one, is that we live in the solution a lot. I mean, this guy talks about being brought to his knees and losing his mind on his bathroom floor thinking he was going to die because of drugs. But, man, he's been living in the solution for a long time, and he's been helping other people with their solution. 65,000 people, this group, the Phoenix, has affected and impacted. So he impacted me today. Hopefully he does for you. Somebody that is always impacting America and countries beyond, Kevin Souza.
Hello.
Scott.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, man, what's going on?
Not too much. Thanks for reaching out.
Oh, man, thank you for coming on board to chat with me for a little bit. I can't thank you enough, and I appreciate you fitting us in. Are you traveling today?
I actually just got back to Boston, and I'm here to meet with the Phoenix leadership team. We're doing our strategic planning, and so yeah, I'm back here. I live in Denver normally, but I'm in Boston for a period of time as we expand here. We have sort of our East Coast headquarters here.
And you're from Boston, right?
I got sober here. I'm actually from Pennsylvania, but I got sober here, just a little over 24 years ago.
What part of Pennsylvania?
Lancaster County.
Okay.
Sort of farmland.
Oh, I know.
How
I
about
know.
yourself?
I'm from outside of Philadelphia, like
yeah,
Bryn Mawr, Villanova, that area.
Oh yeah, so we probably misspent our youth in some of the same places.
Absolutely. So just to give you a quick background, I'm going to give an intro for you, so we don't need to do that right now, and we can just get right into the conversation if you're okay with that.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Now, how do you say your last name? Strode?
Strode. Yeah.
Strode. Okay. I want to ask you about. First of all, you've been sober for how long?
Just over 24 years.
And you've been doing the Phoenix since 2006.
Correct.
So you're the executive director of the Phoenix. For people who don't know, what exactly is the Phoenix?
The Phoenix is a free, sober, active community that uses the inherent transformative power of activities, some athletic-based, some sort of social events. But really, those are just a place that you meet a new group of friends that support you in your recovery journey. So we use the inherent transformative power of sports and activities to bring people together in recovery, to find the physical and emotional strength they need to stay sober.
And the reason that's the first question I ask you is because I'm just doing a little bit of research. And this is as of a couple years ago. You're talking about tens of thousands of people that you have helped through this.
Over 65,000 people.
Over 65,000 people. And so this is something you started in recovery back in 2006. But before that, take me through your last night drinking and using.
Yeah. So should I give a little background or just go right into
You can give some background. Give a little background.
Yeah. So I started drinking and using pretty young. I experienced some early childhood trauma, and that was really what I was trying to numb with the drugs and alcohol. Really what I was trying to do with them is sort of fill in some self-esteem wounds.
What happened the first time you drank? Do you remember? Like, how'd you feel?
Yeah, I do remember. I mean, for me, it wasn't so much the physical sensation of getting drunk the first time. It was really kind of the status that came with it, right? Like being able to steal booze from the liquor cabinet, or knowing who could buy you beer. It just sort of like elevated my place in my peer group at the time. And I so much wanted to be accepted and part of that. That really was the kick for me, was being able to do that. And then over time, the physical addiction started to kind of take hold from the substances.
I can totally relate, because it's that early on, when you quote unquote cool crowd or whatever, the people that are the knuckleheads that are drinking like us, it feeds your ego, and then eventually it feeds your addiction. So it's like the perfect package.
Yeah, it really was. And so for me, having some of those self-esteem wounds from early childhood stuff, it just fit right in, and I was off and running.
Do you talk about the childhood trauma, exactly what it was?
I not specifically. It was really just stuff that kind of broke down my own self-worth, and for me, I was trying to find that on the outside through kind of where I fit in my peer group, like we were just talking about, or when I couldn't feel that sense of fitting in, I would just numb that pain with more booze or more drugs.
Do you have alcoholism in your family?
I do. I had grew up around alcoholism, and also my father had untreated mental illness, so it was a pretty dynamic childhood.
Yeah, to say the least, right? I mean, there's a lot of times I was predisposed. I think, it was in my family. People used to say my dad was from Connecticut, and people with his family just, alcoholism all throughout the side of his family. Somebody said it doesn't run, it gallops, and man, so I had my father with the untreated alcoholism, did the best he could without question, but untreated alcoholism, which created some trauma for myself, my brothers, I guess. And then we had that physical dependency and addiction too. So it is just quite the rocket ship.
It really is. And when you grow up around it, it's sort of normalized. I kind of joke about this, but it really wasn't a family picnic till somebody went to the emergency room. And, whether you fell off the side of the above ground pool and broke some ribs, or some cousins got in a fight, or whatever it was that was the chaos I was sort of used to. So of course that was sort of the life I started to build for myself.
I heard a guy say it in a meeting just a couple of days ago. Normal is what you get used to. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I look back at my life, and I look at it now in recovery too, when I'm not doing, when I'm not spiritually fit, or, I'm not like I can relate to you when I'm not working out or going to meetings. I get used to stuff that should be abnormal, but it becomes normal.
Yeah, exactly. And, the beauty of kind of the path I've been on recently is like just making that normal something new, and something different, and something positive. And that's what I found in my own journey getting into athletics.
Well, we're jumping around a little bit here, but the reason I asked you, because we started off with how you've begun this venture in 2006. It has touched the lives of, we're moving towards 100,000 people. But your last night, just, checking up on you and reading stuff about you and watching some videos about you, your last night was as bad as it gets with alcohol and drugs. And I think it's interesting for people to get a window into that, because here we are talking to you now. You're going back for a leadership. You got a leadership meeting. You're leading people. And tell us about your last night.
Sure. So, towards the end of my drinking and drugging, it had kind of stripped away all those dreams I had of what I could possibly accomplish, when I grew up, and I was just kind of living day to day in between drinking and drugging, and I had been trying to quit for about a year and a half, but never got enough time to call it a relapse, right? Like it was just, I was kept drinking and using, and I was on a cocaine bender, and I had been out for, essentially 2 days. And I was so paranoid. I was like locked up in my apartment, thought the cops were after me, had all the lights out, was kind of hiding out in the bathroom. And, here I am on this bender drinking and using. And,
if you're at all like me, I'm guessing you're the only person there, right?
Yeah, I'm the only person there.
Yeah.
Years ago, it went from being something that was social to something that was just a couple hardcore users and me, and then it was just me. And anyway, I just, my heart was racing, and I, was so sort of strung out. I just knew that that's how my life was going to end. And I couldn't imagine someone happened to tell my mom that they found me dead on the bathroom floor somewhere. And I woke up that next day and felt pretty beat up, obviously, but set to changing the way I was living. And that was the last night I drank and used.
What was the next thing you did?
For me, I had already been exposed to boxing. And so the boxing gym was kind of my safe place, believe it or not. But I always say that I was scooped up with as much love as you can find in a boxing gym. But I went in there, and there were a couple other sober guys, and they were teaching me about the sport. But I just started going over there with my gym bag and waiting for the place to open, and would go in and work out and help coach other folks. And then when they close up, I'd go home, and that's how I'd spend my weekends.
And this is when you first stopped using, or was this when you were using too?
This was when I was using too. I was trying to kind of like fill in all that time so I wouldn't be out at bars and boozing. But when I got sober, I just doubled down on that tactic. I just started going all the time, and I'd be there, and I try to surround myself with people that were in recovery that were also in the gym. And that's how I started putting together, a couple of days at the time, and that turned into a week, and that turned into abstinence-based recovery.
And so this is what, 1995, I guess?
What was, if I was good at math, I could tell you. It would be, I have 24 years, so it would be coming up on,
I guess 1997.
97.
And so you're going in there, and you're finding that release. Are you finding what you kind of got from alcohol and drugs in that gym with the camaraderie, with the endorphins and the dopamine hits you get from natural, combat?
Yeah. It was interesting. I was actually finding the stuff I was trying to find in booze in the gym, which was more genuine connections, because these guys were really, I was invested in helping them be better athletes, and they were invested in helping me, and we'd help each other train and get ready for fights or whatever it was. And it was a more genuine and real thing than just being impaired, out with a bunch of other people getting high and drinking. And what really made the difference was it actually began to heal some of those self-esteem wounds, because I could sit a little prouder when I was starting to help coach other people. And all of a sudden I was a mentor for the first time in something. I never really felt like I had anything to mentor somebody in previously. And I started to have my own accomplishments, like getting in the ring for the first time is pretty intimidating. And when you do it, you feel lifted because you took on something that was scary.
Win, lose, or draw.
You accomplished a goal.
And so had you not gotten in the ring to actually fight before you were sober?
I hadn't really gotten in before. I was in there training, and we'd kind of go up and spar against other gyms. And actually, the guy I first got in the ring with was also a guy in recovery. And, those guys became my friends early on and kept me on the path.
What starts to happen for you as this fog, tension, shame, right, starts to lift?
Yeah, for me, it just started to I started to begin to dream of what was possible in my recovery, of who I could actually be, not impaired or hindered by my addiction. And I started getting into climbing. I started, I remember my boxing coach told me to start road work, going out and jogging a couple miles a week. And I could barely run 500 yards, and I had to stop and walk home because I was smoking cigarettes and boozing and all that before. so I finally started running. I could run 3 miles. All that goal setting started to kind of show up in this sort of belief in myself that also reflected it in my belief that I could stay sober. And then, as I got more into that sport, doing triathlon, I started just becoming a different person. I had a positive identity for the first time instead of this negative kind of shame that I'd carry around with me, and how I saw myself.
Well, clearly,
it started to be a more positive self-view.
Clearly, not only you're positive, but you're humble, because you tried to skip over triathlon. How does that, so what the hell happens? You're boxing and you're getting in shape and you're getting that fix from boxing, and you say, hey, let's take this in another direction while I box, and you start to work towards a triathlon?
Yeah. Well, I found out pretty quickly that boxing's not great for your head, So, and I was a heavyweight, so that was an issue. This guy's hit pretty hard. So I wanted to find something else, and I found triathlon. I was just kind of on a whim. Found a personal trainer who was a coach, and she said she coached me for my first race. One of the friends from the boxing gym trained with me, and I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know how to swim, but I had begun to do this thing every year on my recovery anniversary. I would try to do something different or new, or something that I wouldn't have been able to do in my addiction. And this was one of those things. It was around my recovery anniversary, and decided to do my first triathlon. And it was a short triathlon, but I finished it. And I have this joke that, my friend came up, she's like, are you a little nervous? And I said, yeah, how can you tell? And she's like, you're putting on your wetsuit backwards, so I didn't have any clue about what I was doing, but I survived the swim barely, and the bike and the run. And, but I was just hooked, I just started to find these things that helped me start to dream again about how big life could be. And I jumped in with both feet, and that ultimately led me into long distance triathlon. Started racing Ironman, and ultimately competed in the world championship at half Ironman distance.
How'd you do with that?
I did okay. I'm a big guy, so I would pass a lot of people on the swim and the bike, and then the run was just people gone by me the whole way.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I was a lot to move down the road on my feet, but on a bike or swimming, I could do pretty well.
So you mentioned something just about the fact that you got nervous, you put your wetsuit on backwards, and it's nuts, because in sobriety, there's like firsts, and then there's just overall big moments, no matter how many times you've done certain things. And there's almost like a sober blackout in a way, where you're just kind of, for me, you're just going through it. But the most important part is you're going through it, and you're not getting drunk, and you're not getting high, and everything gets easier. And like you said, you develop skills where you could actually mentor people, because you knew the way. In this, we're talking about boxing right now, but now we're talking about the triathlon. You go from not knowing how to do it, totally sober, like putting on your wetsuit backwards, to running Ironmans.
Yeah, it's incredible. And what I started to realize is, like, in those activities is also the same hook that you can find in drinking and using. So you do have to be careful. Like, I started realizing, like, I could punish myself with those sports too. Like, I would finish an Ironman, and then I had to do Ironman faster. Then I'd do a mountain bike race. Then I had to do a 24-hour mountain bike race. Like, it always had to be harder and longer. And I started to realize, like, there's a pitfall here as well. It was very similar to my drinking and using. And what I realized, what really filled my heart with these activities, was the training and sharing the path with the other people who were, like I like to say, that would rather get up at 5 a.m. to go train as opposed to stay up till 5 a.m. drinking and using. And I started surrounding myself with more and more folks that thought that way. And that was the real magic. So I started focusing in more on the path as the goal as opposed to the finish line of the race.
Okay, so this is such an interesting topic because I think a lot of people get sober and they find other addictions, whether they're healthy, quote unquote, like I said before, or not. And I talked to my friend, a buddy of mine about this, now I run 9 miles and I eat like 50,000 calories. And then I get up and I have to run 9 miles again. And it's just like, okay, let's take it easy and find some balance here. And because that's just another obsession. I mean, now I'll always say it's not doing anywhere near the damage that alcohol and drugs were doing to me, but it's still another deal where you become wrapped up in it and you become obsessed. So you're saying that the tribal community, that bond you dealt with the people training, is what you got lost in, and not so much attaching yourself to the end result.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I went for the end result first. Like, there was something about boxing, like smashing the heavy bag as hard as I could was something I needed at that time. But then you start to realize, like, your hands are all busted up and you're getting arthritis and you're super young and you're like, you can't do that for the rest of your life. And you just start to realize that, like, I'm still seeking my emotional well-being outside of me because something is getting in the way of me finding it on the inside. That extreme, I always think if it's destructive to you or people around you, you got to look at your relationship with it. And that means that, I know triathlete friends that don't see their kids on the weekends because they're getting their miles in training. That's not that different than not being with your family because you're out boozing and doing other stuff. Like, you can find this unhealthy relationship with those things. But to your point, it's way better, it's way better to be riding a mountain bike than smoking meth. but somewhere in there too, you can also find this healthy balance, right? Where you find that fulfillment and joy and goal setting and accomplishment, but you also have to do it in a balanced way where there's room for the people in your life and to kind of take good care of yourself also.
What was the conduit to that balance for you? I know you touched on it a little bit. If you could elaborate.
I think it was the sort of the joy side of sharing that stuff with other people. Like, it was just the fun, it was like you go out climbing and you come back and you had some sort of like, sort of sketchy day where the weather was bad and you got stormed off a climb you're on. But at the end of the day, you're fist bumping with your friends and you're like, well, man, that was incredible. And man, you really showed up for me in that one part and we wouldn't have made it through if you didn't bring extra water or whatever. Like, you just have these adventures, and it's in those where you start to, like, you realize you're just living and actually reaching some of your full potential. Whereas boozing, I started it because it was a coping mechanism, but it stopped working for me almost as quickly as it started. These things were ways to cope that had a longer fuse, right? It burned longer and stayed with you because it actually created positive sort of self-esteem and positive connections with others.
I love that. It burned longer and stayed with you longer. I've never really been able to package it and describe it to people, but that is what working out, connecting with other people, whether it's when you're not working out or when you're working out. And what you're talking about too, and again, you're a humble dude, you're helping people. I mean, you are on the one end, right, finding a way to cope, but you're sharing time with other people, bringing things to the table.
Yeah, and that was where the shift happened for me, where I started realizing my life had gotten really big and full of, like, opportunity. And I saw a lot of my friends, even in long-term recovery, still white knuckling, like, trying to hold on each day. And I was like, dude, you need to go up a mountain with me or something. Like, let's get out and do something. And we started doing that. And my climbing partner at the time was in recovery. My other climbing partner was a clinical social worker. And so it was like this perfect combo. I was like, why don't we just start taking more people with us? And that was the beginning of what later would become the Phoenix.
So now we're in the Phoenix. I mean, we've reached a point in the conversation where this starts up. How do you get something like this off the ground?
Yeah, well, I didn't know anything about starting a nonprofit. Fortunately, I knew a lawyer who helped me through the paperwork, but we knew we wanted to make it a nonprofit because we wanted it to be free to anybody who was 48 hours clean and sober. And we picked that low bar to entry because we wanted as many people to be able to access it as they could. And it's hard to get 48 hours if you're in early recovery.
It's hard to get 10 minutes.
Yeah, but if you could do that, you could dip your toe in, you could try rock climbing or hiking or whatever, and you do it with other people in recovery and reflection. Like maybe Friday night you'd come to a Phoenix event.
What's a Phoenix event? Like for instance?
Any activity where you're 48 hours clean and sober. It's led by a Phoenix volunteer or staff member. And you adhere to our code of conduct, which basically says if it's not supportive, then it's not welcome. And it's not like you get kicked out for that. It's just a handrail to help folks figure out how to build sort of nurturing community together. But you show up, and it could be yoga or climbing or a hike or a bike ride or a social event or art night. It can be anything that just is a meaningful activity that brings people together in recovery. If you can show up at one and you don't need any equipment, you don't need any know-how, we'll show you how to do it. And oftentimes the instructor is another person in recovery or an ally, somebody who's been impacted by substance use disorder through a loved one or something like that.
I love how you bring those people in under the tent, because that's kind of what this podcast is about. Honestly, sometimes I forget that, but this is for people who are dealing with folks that are struggling or getting clean or in and out, because it's so hard. I mean, they're going through it just as much as the addict is, because it is such a freaking roller coaster ride, and they can't even, in most times, put their finger on it. So to have an outlet like this, where, it's like we could, there's Al-Anon, right? And there's other places where people who have loved ones that are in recovery or that are still getting messed up can go. And then there's a place like this, dude, where, that's incredible that you have put your arms around that group of folks as well.
Well, as you know, right? Like the family goes through the addiction for sure with the person. So why not let the family go through the recovery together too? And one thing that I think is not talked about enough is I kind of think of the family dynamic a lot of times as like a theatrical play, right? Like you get typecast as the addict and alcoholic. And then all of a sudden you're trying to change your role in the play, and everyone's like, whoa. Like, we don't want you to drink and use, but you're the guy who like messes up the family, Christmas party or whatever. Like if you're not doing it, then we actually realize that Uncle so-and-so might be the one that's also doing it, So it's like, you're trying to get out of this role. Everybody almost has to get to know each other again as this family now with someone in recovery. And sometimes it makes people look at their part in the dynamic as well. So I think like if we can create a place where the family went through the addiction together, let's create a place where the family can also go through recovery together. And same thing, they have to be 48 hours clean and sober. They have to adhere to that same code of conduct. But if they do, they can come too.
And where are you guys located? Like, give me a rundown of that so people listening,
sure,
can know.
Yeah, so we're we have sort of a East Coast, West Coast, and Central headquarters. We have a building in Denver, a building in Boston, and we're looking to hopefully find some donors to help us get a building in LA. But other than that, we have volunteers that lead Phoenix and communities across the country. So we're essentially in 40 plus states and 60 something communities. And we just launched our Phoenix app, so anybody can pull it down from the App Store. It's just the Phoenix and it has a big red bird, and you can find a Phoenix event near you. We're in most places, and if we're not in your community, you could raise a hand as a volunteer and start it.
Yeah, and that's, I think a lot of people, You know, I go to meetings, right? I'm a 12-step AA guy. Are you involved in any kind of 12-step stuff, or is that a part of your recovery at all?
I have been over the years. When I first got sober, I was really just in the boxing gym and out climbing and doing triathlon. But 6 years into my recovery, I realized like most of my friends go to this young people's meeting. Why don't I go with them? So I went and I found a sponsor there and I started working the steps. And so it's been part of my story, but not as much in the early side.
Yeah, I mean, and that's whatever, and that's another part of this vehicle. I'm trying to move forward or drive here. It's like, hey, whatever works for you. If you got something that makes you fulfilled, and you're off drugs, and you're off drinking, and your life, if you're all like me, was a disaster before you got sober, like I want to hear about it. I think,
Yeah.
and I have buddies who are in the AA community all around the country who hopefully will hear this and maybe want to get involved, or people that I don't even know, because there's people out there that are involved, whether it's, you know, I said 12 steps or a different kind of recovery, that just want to help and be a part and pass along what they have for somebody else. And a lot of these people love working out and just connecting like we've talked about. So that's a real opportunity for folks. This is the Phoenix is a real opportunity for folks. I love the idea.
The world looks different behind the handlebars of a Rad electric bike. Grabbing takeout looks less like greasy styrofoam boxes and more like a cross-town adventure. Ride shares look less like piling into the back of a car and more like grabbing fresh air with your friends. And commuting can even start to look like the best part of your day. That's because with Rad, the world is what you make of it, not what it makes of you. See for yourself with a 14-day free trial. Find your fun at radpowerbikes.com.
Start your countdown to the most delicious Sunday of the year at Whole Foods Market. The Easter in Bloom event is on. Experience it in stores from March 29th through April 11th with irresistible deals and delights store-wide. Save on feast-worthy animal welfare certified meats like spiral cut ham and boneless ribeye. Then add a flash of green to the scene with savings on organic asparagus. Too busy to cook? Don't sleep on their crowd favorite catering. Find all of that plus Source for Good floral bouquets and more at your local Whole Foods Market.
I love that you mentioned that, because it bridges naturally both ways too. Like, you may show up and never been in the rooms of the 12-step community, and you meet somebody and you're inspired by their recovery, and they're going to their meeting, their eye openers meeting in the morning before the workout, and all of a sudden you join them, you know. And the other happens. Like, we have folks, you know, that have had 10 years in recovery, and their life is still pretty small, and in sort of like where they think they can go with it, what they dream is possible. And they come in and go up the climbing wall and their mind's blown. And a year later, they're going out to Yosemite with some friends to go climbing, and their life gets really big, you know? So we have both things happen.
Why do you think, you know, sometimes it's difficult for people even to get in the positions that you just mentioned that we're talking about because of the stigma? Why do you think that's such a problem still in society in 2021? It is still, we like to think it's not, but it is. Why is it still such a problem, Scott?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a couple things. It's going to take sort of pioneers, right? I think in the recovery community that are willing to be open about their own recovery. That's why I appreciate what you're doing so much. You know, it's like you have a voice and you're using it to bring this into the light. And I think that's awesome. We can still respect, you know, kind of traditions of 12-step communities and keep that stuff, you know, as a place of anonymity for people who need that safe space to step into. But like, I wear a t-shirt that says sober across the chest.
I've seen it. It's cool.
Yeah, and I'm proud of it. Like, I'm not that, I just wear with pride. And it's amazing how many people say, "Hey man, me too, I got 6 years," or whatever. Or somebody comes up to me and is like, "I wish my cousin would wear that shirt."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Hey, here's my card. If I can help him, give him my number," you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And we just, those of us that are willing, you know, to really kind of wear that sober shirt, we can make space for other people to choose, you know, and bring it into the light enough that we start to chip away at that stigma.
One of the things you talk about, I saw in an interview, was almost like the domino effect that shame can have. You know, a family in your neighborhood will have a child, brother, sister, whoever, that overdoses on drugs, and they won't tell anybody. It's so much shame.
Yeah.
And then the family down the block who doesn't, hasn't had an impact that a story like that could deliver. They have a son who overdoses, or the person we're talking about generally overdoses. And it's this tight lid we keep on addiction because of the shame attached to it that keeps people dying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, imagine if people actually turned out, in a way to help in a non-judgmental way, to like really be there for each other in these tough times, around substance use disorder or mental health struggles or whatever it is, then we'd be more prepared if that came up in our own life, right? Because we sort of take the shame out of it. We start to realize, like, maybe there's some resources out there, and here's how we got plugged in our community, and now we can help somebody else with that. And it's just something we need to just move past, honestly. And I think if we can be a voice that helps people realize, I think of it this way, like, most of us in society are seeking our emotional well-being externally with something, by what we look like, how much money we make, where we live, what our job is. We just chose a drink and a drug, right? Like, our thing, that was our thing. And ours got loud enough that we had to listen to it. But other people have other things they're using. It's just they're using something different.
Yeah.
And so if we just realize it's a human experience, right, and that we all can heal, and we all have this intrinsic strength, we just need to find a place to let it out, then I think we'd be way better off.
I like how you say we're all recovering from the human experience.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we really are. I wanted to ask you too about, you're a face and you're out there. Do you ever feel this? I'm just curious about this. Do you ever feel any pressure, to live a certain way, to act a certain way? Does it almost help keep you on the path, or is it like is it sometimes exhausting?
It's both, I'd say. Like, it definitely. It's like, I can't go pick up a beer. I'd blow up this whole thing we built, right?
Right?
Like,
yeah.
But it's also one of those things that, like, I think that I would like to just be one of many, because, like, the more of us that put our shoulder into this issue and start leaning into it and trying to come up with change, like, what hurts my heart a little bit is, like, the lack of sort of entrepreneurship in how our country's approaching this. Like, we kind of wait for sort of DC to release whatever funding they're going to in the space. Then the people that get that funding go get that funding, and they do that thing, which is, what if we said, how do we create something so much better tomorrow that the way we're approaching it today becomes obsolete because we're actually making a difference? Like, that's the kind of conversation I'd like to see start happening, where thought leaders are coming together and, like, let's sort of blow this whole thing up, how we're approaching this. And instead of just a drug to get you off drugs, like, let's figure out how to tap into the intrinsic strength we all have, because everybody who's struggling with substance use disorder also has the intrinsic strength inside them to be the solution to their own problem. If folks like yourself and other people that have gone before can scoop them up with that love and help them get them on the path, then recovery is possible for them too.
And look, I don't think, hey man, somebody wants to be sober and they want to keep it anonymous, like 150%. But I also do think it's a kind of a bummer that, some of the coolest people I know are sober, whatever your definition of cool is. Some of the people I like the most that wear life like a loose shirt, and nobody knows it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
God damn, because people get the idea that we're all hanging out in church basements, singing Kumbaya or judging other people. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And I love people like you getting out there, and, basically you're holding gatherings all over the country where people can go and get well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I love about it too is, like, it becomes, like, so for example, we have CrossFit's a big part of our programming. We have kind of a collaboration with CrossFit corporately. And we had a bunch of our guys go to a CrossFit competition, and they crushed it. Like, they did great. Like, they're like super athletes, right? They're in some ways more disciplined than other athletes because they're not going out drinking, they're training, they're eating well, they're now on this path, and their performance sort of reflects that. But there's this great part where somebody came over and they're like, "Hey, what's that thing all the guys have on their ankles?" And I was like, "Oh, they're ankle monitors, right? Like they're all, most of them are on probation, you know."
Yeah.
But here they are at the end of this thing on the podium, you know, standing up there with first and second place, and they're wearing sober shirts, and they're, for lack of a better term, starting to paint this picture that recovery can be badass and awesome.
Yes.
And it's something to be excited about. It's not like when I got sober, and maybe you felt this way too, but you kind of felt like your life was ending.
For sure.
And what if we paint the picture that life actually begins when you make that decision, and that it's something that you should just jump into sooner because there's so much out there for you.
I mean, dude, that is absolutely the truth. And especially for me being, you know, an addict, I used to sit on a bar stool, high on drugs, lying to people about doing stuff that I do now sober, that I'm actually doing.
Yeah.
That I had no shot of doing if I stayed high or drunk. And that is something that I think for people to see physically, right? Like the guys out winning the CrossFit competitions with the ankle monitors on. Like, those aren't leg weights, all right? Like these are guys who are starting to walk the path and have been given the opportunity to do that. What's it been like for you to see some of those? I mean, if you have one or two that jumps out that you want to share, but like the success stories, I'm sure you've had people come up under you that have really just blown the doors off it.
Yeah, that's amazing to see. Like, you know, at the Phoenix, I kind of think of it as a movement, not a nonprofit. You know, like it's anybody who is passionate about something and cares about this issue can raise their hand to be a volunteer to start Phoenix in their community. And I just was moved by all of those volunteers, how many lives they change, and in places where I've never been, I've never met them, never been to any of their Phoenix events, but the people coming out of their events are having that same Phoenix moment that I did when I got in the ring for the first time, or somebody else did when they tied into the climbing rope for the first time. Like, they truly are paying it forward. And it just continues to remind me about the intrinsic strength and the resiliency in people. And, you know, I don't know. I think the moment that stands out for me is, so I raced all these Ironman, all this stuff, and then started a nonprofit. It grew to be a national nonprofit. So I pretty much just work now and try to stay fit on the side.
Okay.
But I went to a Phoenix ride, and I like bonked, right? Like, I hit the wall. We're riding up this hill. My legs were shot. I'm like trying to get to this top of the hill. And there's this volunteer at the top, pulled over on the side of the road, a Phoenix volunteer, and he reaches into his pocket on his cycling jersey, and he gives me a gel, you know, and I like eat this thing because I'm like hitting the wall. I needed some sugar. So I was like, eat this gel. And he's like, yeah, man, in my volunteer training, they told me I got to carry some extra snacks in case people.
He has no idea who you are, right?
Yeah. And so I'm like, in some ways, years later, I saved my own life by this volunteer guy giving me this gel. But anyway, it was just so cool to see how he had no judgment about me. He just was there for me. He waited for me at the top of that hill. And I continue to get to have my own Phoenix moments, even with inside of this bigger thing. And imagine if we did that for each other in society more broadly. Imagine if we just waited at the top of the hill to help somebody who's having a hard time getting up it, whatever that hill is for them. Like, we could do this for more than just the recovery community.
Well, and if we applied that rule you guys have, right, that guide rail, just be supportive, or we don't, you know, we'd rather not have it.
Yeah, it's simple.
You have a TED Talk, which you know,
Yeah.
I don't talk to too many people who have TED Talks, so that's pretty. That's I don't know if that's you know, a shot at me, or you know, I think it probably says a lot more about you and your success and your ability to convey your recovery and inspiration to folks, but without giving it all away. People can find it online. You know, just Scott Strode, STRODE. It'll be on this podcast, but you know, TED Talk. What are some of the key points you hit on in that talk?
Yeah, I think the thing that really stood out for me on that is that moment where we need moments of perspective on our life where we can see the potential that's within us. And I think for folks struggling with addiction, we need enough of a clear head and that often gives us that moment of perspective on our life. That's why, you know, if you've been to treatment 3 times and you go a fourth, don't feel defeated, right? Like maybe you needed that 4th time to get that moment of perspective. You know, I was on the bathroom floor paranoid enough times using and drinking, and it took number 27 or whatever time it was for me doing that for it to stick. But like you need moment of perspective on your life, and you need this belief that you can change your fate, right? That you can change your life and the way you're living it. And there's something about the strength you find in sort of moving your body. Like, you know, if you're new to recovery, like, and you're trying to get sober, like try to get 1 day clean and go out for a walk. If you got 1 day, try to get 2 and go out for a run. If you get that, try to get 3 and do it with somebody else. You know, like just start building on it slowly, and it's amazing how it starts to take shape. Recovery is possible for all of us. It's just sometimes we gotta sort of stand on the top of the mountain to be able to see that within us.
Were you surprised at yourself when you're giving that TED Talk? You're like, man, this is I've come a long way.
yeah, I do. I am often, you know, like I kind of joke, but I never thought that, you know, like there was a time in my life I didn't know you put the lid back on a bottle of booze. Like I thought it was just like you pop the top and then it's good to go.
Yeah.
And then you know, I'm living in a city now in Boston where I used to smoke crack in alleyways here.
Yeah.
And to go from that to being able to use that experience and my experience of, you know, climbing and triathlon and all this other stuff to help others think about all that potential that isn't realized in the people that are out there now. Like if we could get them on the path with us, you know, this like country would be unstoppable.
Was it hard to start this nonprofit? I mean, walk me through what that was like. Again, without giving exhausting detail. I know you don't have all day.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah. I mean, I think the hard part is you know, I didn't sort of have a business background, right? Like I had this heart drive to start a nonprofit. I would say to myself, if I could speak to myself back then, I would say try to partner with somebody who's already doing something. Because a lot of people are like, oh no, my nonprofit's a little different. I'm like, I'm sure there's something out there. Excuse me, but if you want to help veterans, there's probably a great veterans nonprofit you could go partner up with.
Gotcha.
If you want to help do something like Phoenix, why don't you just help start Phoenix? You know, like we're already rolling and we've already kind of done the hard work of clearing the road. So I'd say collaborate and partner up with people, but I didn't know that wisdom then. And so we just kind of charged off doing our own thing. And I'd say the hardest part was getting folks to care about the people we serve in the way that we wanted them to. So to break that down a little bit more, like there's some perception I think that people have sometimes that it's the addict's fault and that it's a moral failing. And I think we need to let that go, because the more I've learned about, you know, adverse childhood experience and some of the traumas that that members who come to our program have been through, no surprise they're drinking and using to numb that.
Yeah.
Right? Like let all that go and just realize that they don't want to be in that life either, and do what you can to help them, like to get sort of funders to start to think differently about this. There's a term you'll hear in sort of philanthropy around evidence-based practices. If we only bet on evidence-based practices, what about the innovations that actually could maybe even be better than them?
Yeah.
And Phoenix was one of those things where in the early days, they're like, wait, so you're just going to take people out in recovery and ride bikes with them and it's going to keep them sober? And I was like, yep, pretty much. Like,
yeah, that's never been done before, so we don't know if we can let you do it.
Yeah, but over time, we started to have thought leaders that are philanthropists also come alongside us and say, we can believe there can be a better way, that maybe it's not just a funding issue, it's actually an innovation issue in this space, and started betting on Phoenix in a big way. And that's what helped get us to as many places as we are today.
How have you seen the recovery community? I mean, we talked about sort of the underbelly of it with the shame and the stigma, but how have you seen it evolve over the course of, for you, the last quarter century?
What's really cool about that is I do think, not as quickly as we wanted to, I do think the stigma and the shame is starting to melt and starting to go away to some degree. Because, in the early days, like I'd wear my sober shirt around some of my recovery friends and they would feel uncomfortable. They're like, I don't know, man, that's kind of bold,
Uh-huh.
And I was like, I don't think it is. And now there's people in Phoenix that are posting on their social media about them being in recovery and having a tough day. And other Phoenix people in their social media feed are hitting them up and saying, all right, where are you today? I'm going to get some women together. We're going to come over there and get you to a meeting. And the woman who posted it is, within, 6 or 7 responses on her social feed, there's women showing up at her house to get her connected.
Yeah.
And it's like, people are already being open about it. Like, we need to lean into that and not let sort of our older mental models like hold us up from the innovation that could come, because, sobriety is on TikTok already, like I barely know how to open the app. Yeah. But like it's going to innovate, and it's going to do it because the need is there, and people want to find a better way. Let's just lean into that and let what we build tomorrow be so much better than what we have today, that maybe there's less people that have to go down the path that you and I did.